and welcome to UUCC, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua. We are a group of spiritual freethinkers who gathered to celebrate life, build community, and better the world. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome. I'm Nancy Reed, your worship associate for this morning, and the service today will be led by our minister, Eileen Casey Campbell. Thank you to everyone on this morning's worship team, including music by Bill Mills, Nursery Care for Children Under 3 by Melissa Jacoby, and Children's Church for Children 3 and Over by Aaron Waller and Kaya Mills. If this is your first visit, welcome. We invite you to sign the visitor's book in the entryway. Whether it's your first visit or your 1,000th, we're glad you came. This service is also being live streamed on our YouTube channel. We will plan on continuing with hybrid worship services throughout the church year, so you can join us each week here in person, on Zoom, or on YouTube later. A few announcements, very few. Every fourth Sunday, going forward for a while, every fourth Sunday will be our service Sunday. We'll gather here at the usual time in person and on Zoom for a brief service to introduce an activity we can all work on together to help put our values into action. We'll end the live stream early, but we'll invite participants on Zoom to stay on to work on the project from home. And if you're curious about what the projects look like, there is some on the back table in the entryway when you come in. It was fun last week. And you may have noticed that the Joys and Sorrows cards are back out on your chairs. We invite you to bring them forward. We invite you to bring forward any cards you would like to share and place them in the basket after Bill rings the chimes and begins to play. You can also come forward to drop a pebble in the water at that time if you have a joy or sorrow that you would prefer not to share. And so now,
enter a space of worship. Unless there are more other announcements.
yes, are there any more announcements?
I have an
Karen.
announcement. Next week, we will be having a Valentine's Day bake sale. So bring Valentine's Day baked goods and or be prepared to enjoy some Valentine's-themed baked goods.
And if the people at home couldn't hear that, next week is a Valentine's Day bake sale. So come and join us, or let us know if you want any of the baked goods. I'm sure we can work that out. Okay, as we prepare to be fully together, I remind you to silence your phones and devices. And now we will enter into a space of worship. And now is the time to bring forward any joys or sorrows you might have. And Elliot, would you come forward and help light the chalice, please? And if everyone would join with me in the words for our chalice lighting. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs.
Like this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and beauty, in celebration of the life we share together.
Hey, it's harder than it looks.
Throughout opening words are about our opening hymn, which is number 149. If you want to be looking at it while we're talking about it, you don't need to be. It's not like a follow along in the book type of thing. Just, if you're that kind of person, you might want to be looking. It's one of my favorite hymns, Lift Every Voice and Sing. And we sing it this morning on the first Sunday of Black History Month because it's known colloquially as the Black National Anthem. And it is a song that I used to never choose to put in an order of service. As somebody who did not grow up in any Protestant Christian tradition, I learned almost all the Protestant hymns I know once I went to seminary. And I went to a majority Black seminary. We sang this hymn almost every week, and I thought it was ubiquitous. I thought it was like Amazing Grace. It's just a hymn that everybody knows. It's just like in the Protestant waters we swim in, and everybody knows it. And it turns out for white congregations, or mostly white congregations, that's not the case. It doesn't get sung that often. It's rhythmically a little bit complicated. It's honestly not that hard. But white congregations, once I graduated from seminary and started putting this hymn in orders of service, struggled with it. And so I decided I just wasn't going to use it anymore, because I decided it was better off that we not struggle through and butcher this very culturally important hymn by failing to sing it or singing it badly. And it would be better if we just never sung it at all. And then during the pandemic, my friend Jonathan, who is a preacher in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, although he would want you to know that he's Baptist born and Baptist bred, and when he dies, he'll be Baptist dead. He preached for us. He lives in Baltimore, but because we were on Zoom, he preached here because we could be anywhere. And he threw into his sermon a few phrases that were casual quotes of this hymn, as if it were ubiquitous, as if everyone knew. He said, "When did we stop saying, 'Stony the road we trod'?" And then afterwards, I was telling him how great I thought his sermon was, and I said, but we actually never were saying "Stony the road we trod," and certainly never "Bitter the chastening rod." We don't have a lot of experience with chastening rods in our culture. So, and it's not a hymn that we really sing. And he said, "Why isn't it?" And I explained, and he said, "Well, if your people don't know it, you should teach it to them. It's really an important hymn. Isn't that your job?" And I said, "Yeah, shoot, it is my job, isn't it?" And then I made it Bill's job. So we decided that Bill would sing it in our Zoom worship. We would choose it as a hymn periodically every few months when we were worshiping on Zoom only, because the only voice we could hear singing was Bill, and Bill doesn't sing it badly. He sings it very well. And so we would get to know it that way, and we wouldn't hear everybody else struggling along. And so we sing it today, and I want to preface it with these words by my colleague, Reverend Aisha Ansano. She writes this: "This is a hymn that gets sung in school, in church, at various MLK Day celebrations, and over the whole course of Black History Month. It's a very, very powerful song, but it's often sung without context, and at times it's sung without a lot of intentionality. When you sing 'Lift Every Voice and Sing,' do you pay close attention to the words? It's easy on a Sunday morning to open the hymnal and sing along without necessarily processing what we're saying, what the words we're saying really mean. Words like, sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Bitter the chastening rod felt in the days when hope unborn had died. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. This song deserves to be sung with our attention. It's a song that starkly names the horrors and violence of racism in this country. And it's a song that should make us uncomfortable. Uncomfortable with the history that it calls upon, uncomfortable with the fact that the struggle for racial justice continues and has not come as far as it should have by now. How can anyone sing the words, treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, without some deep, deep discomfort?
So when we sing this song, will you join me in singing with intentionality? Will you lean in and let go in that deep discomfort that I will be feeling in singing those words? Discomfort with the pain and the horror that they refer back to. Discomfort with the fact that they don't just refer to a distant history, but also to what is happening now. Will you commit to sitting with your own discomfort? And then will you tap into that discomfort and do something? Will you lift your voice and sing until earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty? So let's hold Reverend Aisha's words in our hearts as we stand in body or in spirit and sing together this morning. Hymn number 149. helpers for this story. Is anybody feeling like a helper? Here they come, 2 helpers, Ewan and Elliot. Okay, who feels very strong and firm today? Okay. Let's see, I think, Ewan, let's have you be over here. Elliot, I'm really going to hold for you. You come on over here. You're going to be flexible School of Better Things. Yeah, I thought so. So, yes, beautiful. That's how it's done. This is a story that takes place in a pine forest, on the edge of a pine forest. It comes to us from the Taoist tradition. And so this forest was full of tall, straight, strong pine trees, just like this one right here. He was raised on the edge of the pine forest, and he was raised to be strong and rigid and firm and never bending, right? Show us how you can stand so strong and tall. Exactly. And just on the edge of this forest, though, there grew a willow tree who wasn't raised in the same way as the pine. The willow tree, he was supple and bending. He loved to sway in the wind. He loved to bend his branches and then watch them spring back to life. He would reach all the way down to the earth and then spring back up with the breeze, exactly like this. And so one evening, in this pine forest, there came a blizzard. And the pine trees all told each other and told the willow on the edge, "You had better hold firm. This heavy snow is falling on us." And so the pine trees all held their branches out, firm and strong and broadly as they could. Yes, exactly. And the snow started to fall, and some of them felt their strength wavering as the snow fell on their branches, but they stayed firm. They would not bend, and they told each other, "Stay strong, don't bend to the weight of the blizzard." And they whispered it to the willow tree, who didn't listen. No. As snowflakes fell on the willow's branches, they bent down, the snow slipped off to the earth, and the branches sprung back up again. Yes, it was like a dance. And as more and more snow fell on the strong, rigid pine trees, suddenly their branches started snapping off in the blizzard, and many of them fell right to the ground. Really didn't know how that was going to go. And afterward, the pine trees looked at their friend the willow, and they learned a little lesson, I like to think, about how to face an obstacle. That sometimes, if we let ourselves bend and yield and even bow all the way down to the earth, the obstacle might just slip off of us so that we can spring back up again. And this is the end of our story. Thank you.
And now is the time in our service to join together in the spiritual practice of generosity. Your gifts of both time and money support our church in its work. And each week we would like to spotlight a group or a committee and thank them for what they do. And Megan Cabral has been our social media person for quite a few years now. She's looking for some help with that. So if there's anybody who is interested and savvy about Facebook and Instagram and those things that are new and necessary, I guess, maybe you would get in touch with Megan Cabral. And thank you, Megan. A quarter of our plate collection for the frozen season goes to the M.K. Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence, whose mission is to help individuals and communities develop the inner resources and practical skills needed to achieve a nonviolent, sustainable, and just world. You can give to this morning's offering by placing a cash or a check into the basket, or by one of the options on your screen if you're at home. Please make a note that your gift is intended for today's offering, and we will now gratefully accept that offering.
Friends, we are a community that promises to one another in our joys and in our sorrows, we are with you. We say to each other in our celebrations and in our pain that you are not alone in this. We have joys and sorrows on our hearts this morning that we hold a space for here together. Several of our feelings this morning are around sending love and healing energy to our friend and member Kevin House, who is recovering from a fall at home. He's having a rough time, but thinks he will be okay in a few days. And then as Nancy places one last stone, there's an additional joy from Nancy, too.
Yes, I have one more joy that I wanted to say. Maybe some of you remember my grandson, Ben Kelly. For a couple of years, he was went downstairs and was the church school assistant. He and his wife are going to have twins this summer.
For all these joys and sorrows and all those left in the silence of our hearts, we say to one another, we are with you. Will you say it with me? We are with you. And now it is time to go to religious education. You can follow Miss Erin and Miss Kaya. It's my kids who took twice as long to go downstairs. Sometimes we open our service and we are like, children and their noises are welcome in this place. And then I'm like, not you two, though. Not your noises. Anyway, now is the time where we enter a time of centering, prayer, followed by some shared silence. So I invite you to get comfortable in your seat. Maybe let your feet touch the floor, your shoulders fall away from your ears, perhaps even your eyes fall closed. As we remind ourselves that by silence we mean the absence of grown-ups talking to each other so that we can listen more closely to the sounds of life. Let's take a deep breath together. Let's be here in this moment, in this space, and nowhere else, if we haven't already fully arrived. Spirit of life, teach us to surrender. Show us how to let go. Teach us how to surrender from the battles we never wanted to fight, from the war we don't really believe in. Let us let go of the prejudices we've learned, the deeply buried hates and heartaches and hardness that we defend against change in spite of ourselves. Teach us to unmake the battlements we've built in our hearts, to set down the swords we use to shelter the us we don't really want to be anyway. Show us how to take apart the armor we wear to keep those painful parts hidden, even from ourselves. Teach us to surrender and to dismantle the arsenals of our souls, to melt down their defenses, shielding our hurt and our hurtfulness, to form them into plowshares, into the tools of growth. Let us let go. Amen.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots holding close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
My kids do Taekwondo, a Korean martial art in the same family of martial arts as karate, kung fu, aikido, judo, and actually Tai Chi as well. And last year, I went with my older child to a Taekwondo tournament and was able to watch him spar against opponents in a non-practice setting for the first time ever. He said I could tell you this story because, and I quote, I won it. And he did. He won first place in his sparring category of level and size. But the way he won was what I found so surprising. I have never done a martial art or any type of fighting thing, or if we're being super honest, much of any sports things. And I thought that it would be pretty aggressive, I guess. But that is really not this kid's jam. And so I went in there being all like, it's about learning and having fun, and I'll be proud of you when you do your best, no matter what happens. Classic mom stuff. But then I watched my kid absolutely destroy his opponents by being whatever the opposite of aggressive is. Soft, relaxed, yielding. Rather than brace against his opponent's hits and kicks, he moved with them, refusing to absorb their energy. A punch came for his shoulder, and he just turned his shoulder with the force, like seaweed meeting a wave. A kick came toward his head, and his head bowed with the kick, not ducking out of the way, but carrying the force of the kick with it so that his opponent fell over. That's a point deduction, apparently. I found out as it happened because I'm about as bad at being a sports mom as I am at being a sports participant. So my kid just danced like this, softly moving along with, not against, all the blows of his opponents until they all fell over or tired themselves out, hardly striking any blows of his own in return. And it looked nothing like the fight match I was expecting. And yet there he was at the end of it, unharmed, and being handed a little gold medal. And all my little Taoist had to say about his style of sparring was, they tell you to relax into the hit, and it really works. And we've already covered me not being a great sports mom, so my first thought after parental pride was, this'll preach, I think. So, of course, I had to take a deep dive into the theory of Taekwondo technique. And it turns out that one of its core principles is called, in English, relax strike, where high-level practitioners are taught to relax all of their muscles in between each strike that they make for the purpose of conserving energy and shifting their center of gravity slightly to make oneself harder to knock over, and for using those relaxed muscles to move with an opponent's strike to negate the impact of those strikes. And because at this point you're like, did I accidentally sign up for a lecture on martial arts? Know that it's a religious strategy. It's likely that this tactic of yielding to win comes to Taekwondo through a long line of philosophical inheritance across the Yellow Sea inland to the Henan province of China and the beginnings of Taoism. So allow me to read you this excerpt on the principle of Wu Wei, or very roughly translated, non-doing, from a commentary on the Tao Te Ching by Alan Watts. Thus, Wu Wei, he writes, as not forcing, is what we mean by going with the grain, rolling with the punch, swimming with the current, trimming sails to the wind, taking the tide at its flood, or stooping to conquer. It is perhaps exemplified in martial arts where an opponent is defeated by the force of his own attack, and the latter art reaches such heights of skill that I have seen an attacker thrown to the floor without even being touched. The principle is illustrated by the parable of the pine and the willow, which we told today. The pine branch, being rigid, cracks under the weight of snow, but the willow branch yields to the weight and the snow drops off. Note, however, that the willow is not limp but springy. Wu Wei is the lifestyle of one who follows the Tao and must be understood as a form of intelligence. That is, of knowing the principles, structures, and trends of human and natural affairs so well that one uses the least energy in dealing with them. This intelligence is, as we have seen, not simply intellectual. It's also the unconscious intelligence of the whole organism, and in particular, the innate wisdom of a nervous system. So Lao Tzu wrote in the Tao Te Ching about this principle of yielding, of staying soft, as rooted in that universal oneness of everything. And he said that our connection to that oneness, to that wholeness, is available to those who notice it, is lost when we oppose in strength, rather as if we are separate, right? It's lost when we treat ourselves as if we are separate, instead of yielding in love, as if we are part of the same source. Paddling without an awareness to the energy of currents is a struggle, but floating with a current in connection to our surroundings is peace. And Taoism makes its way into our religious inheritance through France and then across the Atlantic to the New England transcendentalists of the early 19th century, mostly by way of Unitarian-affiliated Henry David Thoreau, who we know owned French commentaries on Taoism, even though an English translation of the Tao Te Ching didn't come till some decades after his time. Noticing the themes in Thoreau's work, I think we can pretty safely assume that he read those commentaries we know he owned. In fact, they seem to have been fairly influential on his thought around civil disobedience as a principle in transcendentalism. This principle of Wu Wei shows up in his thought around the ethics of disobedience without violence, where the justice-seeking person is like seaweed, swaying in the river as it flows past. They refuse to be dragged along in the current, planted firmly even while yielding to the flow. If they stayed rigid and forceful against the nature of the water, they would break. But by bending, by giving the energy of the water, giving in to the energy of the water, the seaweed not only survives, but stays rooted where it is. We see this principle of yielding show up in our modern justice movements, inherited by way of Thoreau to Martin Luther King Jr. King wrote about reading Thoreau's Civil Disobedience in undergraduate school, saying, "I became convinced that non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good. No other person has been more eloquent and passionate in getting this idea across than Henry David Thoreau at that time." As a result of his writings and personal witness, we are the heirs of a legacy of creative protest. Now, by the time he made it through seminary at my own alma mater, Crozier Theological School, Dr. King had a conviction of the Taoist principle as understood by Thoreau, and he had faith in the possibility of a world as described by Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. In case it's been a minute, let's hear a bit of what that was, yeah? So we're looking at Matthew chapters 5 through 8. We're not going to read all of it. Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, they will be called the children of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom." And actually it goes on for the rest of the chapter and also the next two. You can, as I said, follow along in Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. I'm just kidding. We're not that kind of church. I'm not asking you to pull out your Bible. But if you want to Google it when you get home, you'll know where to find it. In the next few chapters, Jesus preaches on the intentions in our hearts being as important as the actions we take. He's like, if you don't commit adultery, but you're lusting after everyone you see, not cool, bro. Very rough translation. He rejects the eye for an eye code of Hammurabi. He suggests we turn the other cheek when we're faced with violence, to give to the needy, but don't do it ostentatiously. It's like all the greatest hits in these 3 chapters, right? So Dr. King has these chapters from his upbringing in the social gospel movement as the world we dream of, right? This is a picture of the world we long for, the kingdom of heaven on earth, along with the clear understanding that our social structures of oppression and domination mean it is very much not the world we have. And an inkling since young adulthood that Thoreau was onto something with the civil disobedience stuff, but Thoreau's third-hand translation of the Tao is just not cutting it. So he sees the dream, Dr. King sees the dream, the potential, but he can't quite make out the path to get there. He has the ethic of love, but not the methodology for it. Enter Bayard Rustin. He was a gay civil rights leader whose queerness, specifically the arrests for it in his public record, kept him behind the scenes in the movement. In 1955 Alabama, no one was making him a poster boy. He was nevertheless extremely influential to the direction of the civil rights movement. He had gone to India in 1948, just after India's independence, to train in Gandhian resistance methods. And when he went to aid the movement in Birmingham, he brought his understanding of those techniques to Dr. King. And suddenly, Dr. King's theology had a methodology that could be applied in the real world, that had results already. And it suddenly felt possible to hold whole social structures, not just individual churchgoers, to the ethics of the Sermon on the Mount. Now here's where we drop the question of tracing the Taoist inheritance. Hinduism, from which Gandhi derived his methods, along with South African justice movements, is older than Taoism, and historians don't trace a lineage of thought from one to the other in either direction. But as Gandhi said when people pointed out the similarities to him, 2 people can drink from the same pond even if they both discovered it independently. very rough translation. King and the whole movement, at Rustin's urging, adopted the Gandhian method of nonviolent resistance. The strategy was to resist injustice not by force or by inflexible power meeting inflexible power, but by activists placing themselves in the line of oppressors' inflexible power and bending with each blow. Simply sitting on buses or at lunch counters, in restaurants, marching peacefully in the streets, consumer inaction in the form of boycott. Resisting authoritarian power for this movement and for so many following in its footsteps did not have to mean seizing authoritarian power on their own terms. It meant waking up to practice a radically different type of power. Dr. King's goal was not to see Bull Connor languish in a jail cell like he had, but to realize their oneness, to see his heart redeemed by love. It is the power of force overtaken by a power of a radically different kind. It is a strategy that wins by yielding, by giving up the struggle for hard and inflexible power, by giving up the oppressor's lie that we exist alone and outside of each other. It compels in its very passivity the wielders of oppressive power and their bystanders to recognize themselves as interrelated with those they oppress, as part of one river flowing. Nonviolent resistance works when resistors put themselves in the path of power, stay soft, and importantly, are observed. It is crucial that this yielding to win is public. It mattered that Bloody Sunday in Selma was televised, and that it was, at that time, the most violent thing Americans had ever seen on a screen. That was the win. The winning of so many hearts to the movement because they observed and were moved. That's the stumble and fall of the opponent on the mat, tumbling under the force of their own unresisted blow. This is a strategy that requires the softness of bystanders, requires that breakable hearts of observers who hold the power of majority are able to sway. And so let me say this to my fellow white folks out here, which is to say most of us. As white anti-racists, there is another spiritual component to this principle of yielding for us. It needs to include the inner work of cultivating a softness of self, a malleability of spirit that allows us to be receptive to the undoing of what racism has created in us, allows us to be reshaped by justice. The waters of white supremacy we have been grown in would have us hold certainty as one of our greatest values, would have us defend what we're sure we know and are right about against all else. Those rushing waters have taught us that power is a finite resource we have to hoard or lose. It has taught us to hold firm against anything that challenges what we're sure we know and whatever little power we think we've earned. Softness is the antidote to that hard certainty of white supremacy we have inherited. To be part of the movement for liberation, we need to cultivate the receptivity to correction and trust that bending with the flow of change will not destroy us. The work for us is to see the tide of injustice sweep across the bodies of our siblings, across the world, and allow our hearts to be redeemed by their own breaking. Friends, may we be so moved. Amen.
tender-hearted, who love us face to face, untempered and unguarded. They see through our mistakes. They've had loss and been broken more than we could ever know. But it's the tender-hearted who let our life overflow. All the pain the world can bring, bruises more than we see. I couldn't take another hit. Life turned off inside of me. So I built a wall around my heart, keep it in and keep it out. But nothing, when surrounded, survives but fear and doubt. So God bless the tender-hearted who love us face to face and share the living kindness they were given on the way. They've had loss and been broken more than we could ever know. But it's the tender-hearted who let life overflow. Yes, it's the tender-hearted who let life overflow.
Let us close with these words from the Tao Te Ching. Nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water, yet for dissolving the hard and inflexible, nothing can surpass it. The soft overcomes the hard, the gentle overcomes the rigid. Friends, our closing hymn is on little sheets of paper on your seats. It is a shaker hymn that you have been hearing the melody of throughout this service because Bill knows what he's doing. If you would rise in body or in spirit and join with us in learning this new hymn.
So this hymn has two parts, and each part gets repeated. And you'll see the little repeat signs there in the music. It goes like this. Yielding and simple may I be, like the pliant willow tree, humble of heart, pure and free, pride and bondage spurning. Yielding and simple may I be, like the pliant willow tree, humble of heart, pure and free, pride and bondage spurning. Heavenly zephyrs around me blow, and sway me to and fro, cause my soul in truth to grow, and from wrong be turned.
And now will you join me in extinguishing the flame of our chalice? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These be carried in our hearts until we are together again.